Dean's journey with or struggles. So it's a journey of struggling with alcoholism. So you wouldn't say Nadine was an alcoholic, but she had a level of dependency on alcohol that she was unhappy with and wasn't the image that she wanted to lead her children with, and decided to make a change. And so Nadine shares her story, her journey of how she went from having a dependence on alcohol to sobriety. And so she is completely free now. She's liberated and she is absolutely loving life. And so she shares her hot tips on how you can break free of addiction. In relation to this episode, we're focused on alcohol, but it's certainly going to be an enlightening and empowering journey for you to tune into Nadine's success around her letting go of alcohol. So without much further ado, I'd love to welcome you into the discussion I'm having with Nadine Shaw. Welcome on the Me and My Health Up podcast. How are you, Nadine?
I'm very well, Anthony. Thank you for inviting me on. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
So have I, actually, in terms of what you shared with me about your journey to sobriety. And I think it really relates well to the listeners of Me and My Health Up. We've all encountered challenges during our lifetime, and some of those challenges have resulted in some form of addiction that hasn't really served us well. And I think for the young generation today, that addiction is vaping, and for our generation, we sort of got into more the alcohol and the weed and the ecstasy pills. But I think it's a really important topic to hear a story of success and triumph ultimately over what was challenging you. And I would really love you to impart that wisdom with the Me and My Health Up listeners. But before we get into the topic, I would really love you to share your story of how you have arrived at what you're doing today.
I'll try not. The older you get, Anthony, the longer the story takes. Oh dear. So maybe I'll go backwards. I currently live in mid-North Coast, New South Wales. My husband and I moved up here 5 years ago with our two children. So we've got almost 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. So I was a late bloomer when it came to having children. Prior to that, we had a gym in Sydney, and we were, just doing all of the things, working, living, parenting, paying the bills and that sort of thing. And that's why we decided to move to the countryside for a quieter existence, a more simple life. We still have a personal training gym up here. We're lucky enough to train people from our home, not working as much, homeschooling. Okay, so I've kind of gone, I've gone present backwards, present again. I've competed in CrossFit in the 2009, I think, was the first CrossFit Games that I went to. Competed 3 times in the CrossFit Games as an individual and in a team. And I've currently got a podcast as well. It's really hard, because you kind of go down and I'm sure you get it as well, where you just kind of, I'm a personal trainer, but there's so much more, right? But yeah, 2.5 years sober. And I'm really keen to talk about this as well, because I think it's something that more people need to talk about. And, maybe you might not expect that someone who's been a CrossFit Games athlete needed to worry about alcohol, right?
100%. And I think when we see someone that's a personal trainer or an athlete, we often just assume a perfect bill of health, but it's often not the case. And I'd love for you to share your story, how it all unraveled for you.
Okay, so I have to, I'll admit, and it's interesting actually, isn't it? Because you mentioned addiction in your intro, and in our normal social setting, I guess, or our social norms, it's totally acceptable to be a drinker. And I wasn't getting up in the morning and having a glass of wine, but I was drinking consistently, and waking up in the morning and thinking, oh, I can't wait till I finish work tonight so I can have a glass of wine. Or conversely, I'm not going to have a drink today. That would be one of the first thoughts I would have. It's socially acceptable. And so as a personal trainer, working in the fitness industry for 20 years, I was, that's like up until now. All through that time, I was a drinker, but I was ticking all of the other boxes, right? So I was eating well, I was exercising, I was getting enough sleep, although I would argue that my sleep quality wouldn't have been very good because I was drinking. You know, I had a good physique. I was competitive, you know, so I was doing well in CrossFit as well. So it was like, well, I don't need to drink alcohol. I don't need to stop drinking alcohol. In fact, it was like a badge of honor. You know, I could have a couple of glasses of wine in the evening and still beat everyone when I did my CrossFit comps. So that was where I was at in the early 2000s. And then in 2014, I had my first child, Louis. So I was 40, and so obviously I didn't drink. When I was trying to get pregnant, I went through IVF, so I stopped drinking. I didn't drink throughout my pregnancy, but pretty much it crept back in over time. And then I had another baby almost 2 years later. And so I didn't drink again, but pretty much as soon as, you know, as soon as I could, I was back on the wines, and gradually it just creeps back in and it becomes habitual. It's just something you do with other people. So that's kind of where I was at. Do you want me to keep going, or should I take a pause?
No, I really appreciate your honesty and being so open about your journey. This is really revealing, and probably some people are hearing it for the first time from you, and so I really appreciate you being so open and honest. And I can, like we know from I guess the law of conservation is, when we're being really good, it creates a licensing effect in a sense. Well, we then we balance ourselves through the licensing effect, saying, well, I'm doing all these things really well, so therefore I deserve this. And we all do it. Like myself as a nutritionist, I go through the same process as to, I've been so good, I deserve an extra piece of chocolate, or a couple of pieces, or half a block. All right. So this is not uncommon for anyone, even athletes and those Olympians, or, this is what we call the licensing effect. Is essentially we counterbalance and we restore some sort of, we have this conservation of at any point we're healthy, we're also unhealthy as well. And that constant dynamic is throughout our entire lives. And I've always carried ill health with me whilst I've been doing so many healthy things. I've always had some form of disease with me throughout every phase of my life. And that also plays into addictions. And so addictions don't leave us, they just transform into something else. And so I was talking, I have clients that had hard drug addictions, but they've just transformed into another addiction, but that new addiction better serves them and serves their social situation. And the hard drugs was obviously destroying them and their family and things like that. But the new addiction can be, one of my clients, it's Muay Thai boxing, and he's full on into Muay Thai boxing. Previous to that, it was hardcore drugs, and so it's that transformation of addiction. So at any point in time, myself, I go through these waves of my addictions just transforming from one form to another. So I really appreciate your honesty. And what was the trigger for you in terms of I need to change this? What was that moment? And just go through that moment and that thinking process that you wanted to change, and the reason why you wanted to change.
Well, I mean, it was a process, and it was over a period of time. There was certainly always that kind of, for a few years probably, where you'd hear someone say, "Oh no, I don't drink," and I would think, I want to be like that. I wish I could say that. So there's obviously something in the back of my mind that wanted to. And also we had kids. That was probably, you start to weigh up the pros and cons of well, not just waking up in the morning feeling rubbish and having to deal with two small humans, but what does my behavior, how does it impact on them, when they're seeing it? How will it impact on them later in life? If they think it's normal or acceptable behavior. And I got more and more deep, like you think when someone's a personal trainer and they do CrossFit competitively, they're quite deep into the health space, but there's so much more. And and your podcast and my podcast alike really talk about all of those different possibilities that we have for our health and for improving our health. And I'm a massive fan of longevity and health span over lifespan. And that alcohol was the thing. It was like, that was the thing. Out of all of, everything else I was doing well. I was meditating, I was making sure I wasn't stressed. I was going to bed on time, waking up at the same time every day, eating well, exercising, doing all of the things, but I was still drinking. And so there was just this nag, it was like a thorn in my side. And so I got to, I don't even know what year it was. What year were we in?
2024, yeah.
2024, so it must have been 2022. I'd heard of a book called The 30-Day Alcohol Experiment. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to buy it. So I got it on my Kindle and I'm just going to read it and I'm going to commit to 30 days. Okay, so every day from this book, and I don't have the name of the author, but if anyone is interested, it's easy to find online, 30-Day Alcohol Experiment. So I just read a chapter a day. That's all it's told you to do, and it just teaches you about some of the things that are going on psychologically and physically when you drink alcohol. And I followed the 30 days, and I got to the end of the 30 days. And I was like, I think I had planned to do a CrossFit competition, which that was like in January. I had a CrossFit competition for the Masters in mid-Feb, mid to late Feb. And I was like, well, I'm just going to go till then. It seems silly to have done all of this, had a month of sobriety and then go back to it just before a competition. And then, so I did that. And then I was like, well, I'm just going to get to my birthday, which was the 1st of April. And I did that. And then there was something else coming up. And I was like, well, I'm just going to do another month. And then I was like, I don't want to go back now. And I was using an app as well, which is really helpful. Different things work for different people, I know. But I was using an app and it just counted the days. And I've still got it. I haven't looked at it for a long time, but it's going to be a lot of days. So the more days you have, and I looked at it every day, the more days you have, you have one day, you have one drink, you have one sip of a drink, you're back to zero, right? And I was like, and that for me was a really good psychological, powerful tool. But I got to a point where I was like, people would say, are you going to drink again? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. And now I'm like, no, because I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back and have to go through that whole process again. The thinking about it all the time. I'm not going to drink today, and then getting to sort of preparing dinner at dinner time and then being like, I really would love a glass of wine. And then the conversation in your head, don't do. And then before you know it, you're reaching for the glass and you've had your first sip and, to start again. That was how I got to that point.
Amazing. Yeah. So really that empowering why was you wanted to be the best leader for your children and you wanted to be the best role model for your children. I think that was, a strong driver behind your decision making. And then obviously you've got help through education, through the book that's really empowered you and put you in the driver's seat, and you've tracked your progress through the app, which then created momentum. Because you just got to the next milestone. And I think one thing that probably helped you was having another milestone. Yeah, I can get through to my birthday. I can get, get through to this date. And then it became so long without it that you weren't missing it anymore, right? And so what, in terms of your routine now, like obviously the routine was at the end of the day after working hard, training at the gym and training others and things like that. And then looking after your kids and getting them ready and settled. And then you'd go through the having a couple of glasses to wind yourself down now. What do you do to ease off on the day or to shift your busy mindset to then I'm in relaxed mode?
Oh, well, I read usually. It's actually quite interesting because, there are still times there are still times where there's that association, and you kind of have a brain snap where you're like, oh, this is the time where I would have a drink. It doesn't happen as often now, but it still happens. And it's really quite interesting to sort of, be able to observe that behavior a bit more and go, oh, what was it? Why do I feel like I'm missing something? And I don't know. I think part of it is just really habitual. Or is it like I feel uncomfortable just being, with my own thoughts sometimes, and I just want to shut those off. So my evenings now, I mean, we're such dags. We we all go to bed really early, but we always have. So everyone goes to bed at the same time. So we usually have dinner 5:30ish, clean up from dinner. The kids get ready for bed. They watch they have a little bit of screen time. Then, and I know this is not an ideal at the moment, but it's when it happens, I kind of catch up on a lot of my work stuff just on the computer, which is, it's not my ideal, but that's a whole nother conversation. And then I stretch. So I follow a stretch routine. So I try to make sure that I've switched off digital devices at least half an hour before bed. Stretch, read the kids a story before bed, and then we all hit the sack pretty early. Like we're all usually asleep by 8:30. So yeah, that's our routine.
It sounds relaxing. Yeah.
For a while, actually, it was kind of interesting because, we'd kick back on the weekends when we were drinking, and we'd, get to sort of lunchtime-ish and might have, especially in the summer, have a beer. And we would feel like we were basically writing the rest of the day off. Like you run out, you're like, well, I've had a drink, I might as well have another beer. And then before you know it, you're just like, you haven't got the get up and go to do anything. And now we get so much done, but even that took a while to get out of that mindset that like you can do things on Saturday afternoons. Yeah. You don't have to think that your weekend is only in that first part of the day because the rest of it you're going to be drinking.
Did this from this experience, this transition to sobriety, did that lead into you starting your podcast? Like what was the initiation around your podcast? Was it part of your healing journey or part of your self-discovery journey? Was the podcast and wanting to share with others your experiences? And
it definitely started around the same time. So I think the podcast started in March 2022. So yeah, I had just stopped drinking, and I guess the timing was all worked out that way. But definitely it has been part of my journey. I think that stopping drinking is a really important message that I have for people, and also, showing, sort of talking about it, because it is kind of a little bit taboo still. And that, yes, the podcast, it's called Life, Health and the Universe. So it's about sharing stories, and my own story. But it's also about introducing people who have great integrative and preventative health practices, and also esoteric wisdom. And yes, they have all been things that I have used as tools in my journey, because when I don't know if you want to go down this path, but it uncovers things when you stop drinking, and I didn't even realize. I think it's so socially acceptable. Like when I look back, I had my first drink, when I was in my teens, and I was probably an uncomfortable teenager, and someone gave me a drink and I got drunk, and that felt good because I wasn't inhibited by, all of the awkwardness of teenagedom. And then it just becomes normal. You don't realize that you're covering anything up. And so when I stopped drinking, and yes, I started the podcast, and I had these I had moments where I was like, wanted to reach for a drink. It might be when I just released a podcast, for example, or I just posted something on social media and I'd want a drink, and I started to witness that I had some discomfort or some insecurities. So this is kind of a long answer, but I think it is an important part of the journey, has been that it uncovered a whole bunch of stuff that I needed to deal with. And the podcast has allowed me to introduce, lots of different guests that have helped me on my journey and that helped to educate me, but that I hope will now be able to assist other people in, journeys of self-discovery and empowerment.
Yeah, you're passing that candle of enlightenment onto others to really help them.
I hope so.
On their journey based on your experiences, your education, your learning, and the people that have helped guide you. You're sharing that now with others to really make a difference. And what I was hearing from when you were sharing your story is, that awkward teenager found alcohol at a time when they were discovering themselves, and then the alcohol really put a band-aid on things, and that self-discovery stopped because you had the alcohol. And then obviously once you decided to take the band-aid off and remove the alcohol, then you've been going through that self-discovery journey and really understand, and getting comfortable with who you are, and understanding like the triggers that make you feel uncomfortable, and stepping into that space, and that's really like a real healing journey that you've been on via the podcast has been instrumental in this sobriety, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, I think it makes there are definitely times when it is uncomfortable, right? Being yourself, but I see it as a real gift that I had that, like, that nagging, if only I could give up alcohol, if only I could give up alcohol. I had no idea what kind of can of worms it was going to open. But it's the same as with any addiction, I'm sure. Like it's a band-aid or something that just distracts you from yourself. So it can be uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And like meditation or mindfulness can be that band-aid as well, is that in essence it's escapism from your reality that you're not dealing with. Yes. And if you're constantly you've got the reprieve whilst you're doing the meditation or the mindfulness activity, but once that's over, then life is still there. The issues are still there. And I think what you're going through now is the band-aid's taken off. It's starting to heal slowly over time, but you're allowing that journey to unfold, and you're sitting with the uncomfortableness, the awkwardness, and really discovering yourself and getting more and more comfortable with yourself, via the podcast, and really showing or showcasing the world who Nadine is. This is who I am, warts and all, like there's no hiding behind the podcast.
No, true.
And particularly like interviews like this, where it's all revealing. But again, this is part of the healing process, is being open to bringing to your conscious awareness of the reality, as opposed to hiding it behind a bottle of wine and really not dealing with the issue.
Yeah, I think that we can feel quite alone a lot of the time, even when we're around others. And sharing stories and hearing other people's stories, whether it's, addiction, overcoming the odds, surviving an illness or an accident, or, whatever it might be, or happy stories, we start to see ourselves in others, and that can give us hope. Yes. And I think that that's one of the another really important reason to share our experiences. I mean, when you look at it historically, stories are what have connected us for thousands of years. And I think that they're very powerful, because they do demonstrate that we're very connected to each other, and we all hold different parts within us.
Yeah, 100%. And it's really that becoming at one with
Mm.
everyone and everything, and
Yes.
that's the journey that you're on, is that integration and really realizing that you're connected. And you
Mm.
mentioned that, as much as we can have people around us, and this is what loneliness is defined as, is irrespective of how many friends you've got, it's whether you perceive yourself as being like fitting in or feeling connected. It's the perception, and it's got nothing to do with whether you got a supportive family or lots of friends on Facebook, or
Mm.
you go to lots of social things. If you don't feel connected and you don't feel like you fit in, then you're lonely. And the science, when we are lonely, is really, when you speak about health span and longevity, it's like they've equated it in studies to like smoking 15 cigarettes a day is that sense of feeling lonely. So it's
Right. Wow. Wow.
certainly one that you want to address. And increase in all cause mortality, increased rates of heart attacks and strokes. Yeah, so it's a
Mm.
really important one, is that we feel connected. And you're doing this through the podcast, right? You connect with people and you hear their stories, you can relate
Yeah.
to their stories, and you feel very connected.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's one of the wonders of the internet. I mean, it can be the internet itself, I guess, and social media can make us feel disconnected because we're just, we're on our phones, devices, busy with all of that stuff, and it can draw us in. But when we don't have that actual humanness around us, we can still feel quite lonely. And yeah, but one of the beauties of the internet is that we can be connected with many people if we choose to, just in circumstances like this, and we can use that for good.
I totally agree with it. It's all about the
Mm.
intention of why you use the
Mm.
internet or why you use social media. If the intention is to connect and maintain and continue to develop strong relationships, then that's healthy. That's good. But if the
Yeah.
intent is escapism and just mind numbing and not dealing with your issues, then it's like that mindfulness activity that really provides a temporary benefit, but not a permanent solution. And I think,
Mm.
you've gone from that temporary, band-aid to now that permanent solution that's now just a really fulfilling process, is that self-discovery and realizing that there's nothing missing, and that you have everything within you. It was just recognizing it. And I'm thinking that through these interviews and hearing the stories, that you're starting to recognize that you have everything within you that you see in others.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Is there a particular, like you mentioned, obviously that book at the start, the 30 days
Mm.
uh, to getting off the alcohol, or, getting
Yeah.
sober. And then obviously the tracking and things like that. Has there been some instrumental people that have been like really fundamental in terms of that encouraging, that support, and that you'd like to acknowledge in this process?
I would definitely. So I'll say the book again. It's the 30-day alcohol experiment. So it's amazing. So simple. But I had an interview, and it was just a coincidence that this particular coach came up, and I had an interview with her. She's called Sarah Rusbatch, Rusbatch, Sarah Rusbatch, and she has just released a book called Beyond Booze. She's a grey area drinking coach. So although I didn't have coaching with her, she's since we had our interview it was probably 18 months, even 2 years ago. She's like her community has expanded. She's getting some amazing press, and she's got a. Can I share a? Yeah, she's got a group on Facebook called the Women's Wellbeing Collective, and she's got her book Beyond Booze, which she's released relatively recently. But she is a wonderful speaker, she's a wonderful coach, and she's just got a huge passion for helping other people, women in particular, but I reckon that, she'd be happy to help men as well if they would like to stop drinking alcohol, whether it's to cut back, whether it's to, have some time off, or whether it's to quit permanently. She's amazing, and she's doing such great things in the world. She's from the UK but lives in Perth, so she's kind of an Aussie like me, an adopted Aussie. Yeah, and she's just doing amazing things. So I would highly recommend that book and reaching out into Sarah's group if there's someone who's listening who thinks that they could benefit from cutting back or getting alcohol out of their lives.
Thanks for sharing that, Nadine, and I'll include those links to
great.
the book and to her group within the show notes. And you too are doing amazing things. Excuse me, I'm still getting over my sickness that I've had.
Oh, that's all right. I'll let you know.
So I think you're doing incredible things with your podcast, and your story is empowering and impactful. How can the listeners best connect with you? Because I'm sure you're someone that can really guide them through a issue with, alcohol and, really getting them to being their best versions of themselves.
So I've just recently created a website for the podcast. So I'm directing people there because I have got a guest directory, which I'm in the process of trying to get all of my past guests and obviously guests coming up into a directory, so that if someone listens to the podcast, they can easily access all of the information. You're included in there, Anthony. The website is lifehealththeuniverse.podcastpage.io. So if people want to check out the podcast, you can have a look on YouTube from that website. You can go to all the major platforms from that website, and you can check out the guest directory as well to find the guests that are in there so far. And as we build on that, more and more of them.
Fantastic. I'll include the link to your podcast, the directory. And how would you like the listeners to reach out and best connect with you? Via your website, or what's the best way?
Yeah, there is a contact page on the website. So if anyone wants to reach out directly, they can do that. There's also the ability to record a voice message on there, which I haven't had anyone use yet, but
fantastic.
It'd be fun. Yeah. It'd be good to hear it work.
Absolutely. So encourage the Me and My Health Up listeners to get on the Dean's page and to leave a voicemail.
Send me a voice
that
message.
You've listened to the episode and you obviously loved hearing Nadine's wisdom, and you'd like to stay connected with Nadine. I really appreciate you coming on the show, Nadine. You've provided such great insight around your journey that can really be so impactful for others in terms of giving them belief and hope that it is possible, and that it just requires being, I guess, opening yourself up and really going on a journey of self-discovery, which you've done and you've really enjoyed, and now you're providing a lasting impact on the world based on what you've been able to achieve. So accolades to you. And
yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. I really
you're doing amazing work. Keep it up. Keep up the podcast and keep serving others. And I think you'll continue to find a lot of inner joy from that service of others and helping them along their journey.
Thank you, Anthony. I've loved being on your podcast. I really appreciate the invitation.
You're welcome, Nadine. And